Thanks for tuning in to No Wine in No Time. I'm your host Dave, and today we're going to talk about a specific wine growing region in Spain called Toro. So Toro is actually a DO, Denominación of Origine, in the province of Zamora, which is located in the northwestern part of a wine growing region called Castilla y León. So when we look at that area, wine has been produced for over 2,000 years. In those early days, the Greeks who settled the area taught the local Celtic tribes how to make wine. And after that, as we moved into the Middle Ages, Toro wine was the first one to be exported via the Douro River and out through what is now modern-day Portugal. King Alfonso IX was actually the first king to grant land to some of the local religious organizations on the premise that they plant vines and produce wine. That was so successful over the years that today in Toro there's over 40 different churches. It's fascinating. So everything in Toro actually points to a specific grape. It's the most important grape in Toro, and it's called Tinto de Toro, or the black grape of Toro. And in other parts of Spain, we call that exact same grape Tempranillo. But unlike regions of Rioja and Ribera del Duero, Toro produces a muscular, very, very stout brand of Tempranillo. So as the wine culture continued, we hit that late 1800s. In the late 1800s, phylloxera devastated all of the wine growing regions in Europe, except for, you guessed it, Toro. Toro had a specific sandy soil that the little phylloxera louse could not live in, and because of that, those vines survived. And interestingly enough, there are still vines in Toro that are significantly over 100 years old, and they call them pre-phylloxera vines. So a tremendous wine growing history. So let's look at this region a little bit closer and find out what makes it so special to grow wine grapes. So we talked about it being in the northwest corner of Castilla y León. It's about 300 to 400 millimeters of rainfall per year, and the temperature swings from plus 37 degrees Celsius to minus 11 degrees Celsius. And this area gets between 2,600 and 3,000 hours of sunlight a year. Vineyards are planted from 1,800 feet all the way up to 2,300 feet. So that produces exceptional wines. Now, when we look at classifications of Toro wines, if we look at the labels on the back of those Toro wines, we'll begin to see how those wines have been aged. And this all comes down to that DO we talked about before. DO mandates that as you age wine, you label it specific ways so that the customer knows exactly what we're getting. And I'll talk about those here in just a second. So we have the first classification of Toro wine, and that's one called Roble. And Roble means that the wine's been aged somewhere between 3 and 6 months. So it's the lowest version. It would be what we would call a Joven wine in Ribera del Duero or Rioja. Then we move on to the same 3 classifications that we see in other parts of Spain: Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva. So Crianza means that the wine itself was aged a minimum of 12 months prior to sale, 6 months mandatory or more in oak. When we move on to Reserva, Reserva is a minimum of 24 months, 12 of which has to be in oak. And we look at Gran Reserva, that's a minimum of 60 months aging, 5 years, 24 months, 2 years of which has to be in oak. So that system of classification differs a little bit from Rioja and also from Ribera del Duero, but that's the law, and that's how they have to produce their wines in the Toro region. So I've selected a Reserva for you, one that's going to kind of hit in the middle. And this particular Reserva comes to us from Morave. And Morave is the name of the wine, not necessarily the producer. So let's take a look at the wine and see what we think. Well, the first thing that we notice is the wine is a deep, dark purple color. It is opaque. We cannot see through the wine. If we swirl to liberate some of the aromas, we start to smell that richness and power that comes out of here. I'm smelling things like ripe cherries. I'm smelling the oak oil from the time the wine's spent in oak. That's coming out almost kind of like a walnut or nutty type of aroma. Let's go ahead and taste the wine and see what we think. We talk about the power and the richness of a Toro wine, and that comes through from the first sip on the front end of the palate. It enters the mouth with flavors of blackberry and cherry and a little bit of cassis or black currant. Then we feel that beautiful acidity kick in with this nice dry red. And then we start to feel the tannins come on. And all the way through the center is I'm getting a little bit of almost a cedary type of note, which definitely is coming from the oak or the oak oil that is imparted in aging this wine. So if you're thinking about what this would pair with from a wine and food pairing, because of the high tannin level, because of the richness and the high alcohol content in a wine like this, we want to go for more of a stout type of meal. This is something that I would pair with your heavier beef dishes. Think something like a Yankee pot roast. Think a steak on the grill. That would be perfect. Even a little bit of ossobuco, some type of braised veal shank. It would be beautiful with those type of things. Remember, tannins cling to proteins and fat in meats, and they kind of scrub each other out or complement each other. So I'm going to enjoy a little bit more of this Toro Reserva, and I ask that you come back next time, because soon you'll know wine in no time.